I was heartbroken. I'm not actually making a joke at all.
Ryan Reynolds, the face of Deadpool, walked away from Disney, and this wasn't some minor disagreement. It was a jaw-dropping move, a $200 million deal with Warner Brothers, marking his exit from the very studio that had promised to protect his vision, but instead tried to silence him. The clash wasn't just about money, it was about censorship, ego, and a corporate machine that couldn't handle the very irreverence that made Deadpool a global phenomenon. Reynolds is finally opening up about what really happened. He's calling out Disney for blocking his ideas, lowballing him financially, and micromanaging every step of the creative process. What happened to him isn't internet gossip, it's straight from Reynolds himself, and his story doesn't just reveal one actor's frustration, it pulls back the curtain on how Disney operates behind the scenes. The red tape, the oversized egos, and the corporate censorship that's been festering for years. And here's the thing. Reynolds isn't alone. Jeremy Renner, Scarlett Johansson, Chris Evans, major Marvel stars have all turned down offers, voiced their grievances, or been pushed aside quietly. Reynolds is simply the one willing to say it out loud. The breaking point came during the earliest discussions for Deadpool 3. Reynolds recalled pitching a scene he thought was brilliant, Deadpool teaming up with the hunter who shot Bambi's mother.
Banned Ryan Reynolds from mocking one of its classic animated films with Deadpool and Wolverine. So recently we learned that Disney CEO Bob Iger personally made Ryan Reynolds cut a joke about Mickey Mouse from Deadpool 3. At one point in the film, Deadpool was mad at Disney because Magneto didn't show up, and in the script, he was supposed to say, "Disney is so cheap, I can barely breathe with all this Mickey Mouse."
Disney's response was blunt. "We don't touch Bambi." End of conversation. To them, even joking about one of their oldest animated classics was off limits. Now this wasn't some throwaway gag, it was a clever extension of Deadpool's trademark style, fourth wall breaking satire that skewers pop culture and corporate sacred cows. But Disney wasn't having it. They didn't want Deadpool or Reynolds poking fun at their cherished properties. Not Bambi, not Mickey Mouse, not anything that might ruffle the feathers of Disney's carefully polished image. The irony couldn't be bigger. Disney built its empire by buying up edgy, irreverent franchises like Marvel, Star Wars, and Fox's X-Men universe. But instead of letting those properties thrive, they've been sanitized, trimmed, and packaged into family-friendly products. The same attitude that gave us endless safe blockbusters was now being forced on a character whose whole identity is about mocking that exact system. It didn't stop with the Bambi pitch. Reports surfaced that Disney's CEO Bob Iger himself personally ordered a joke cut from the Deadpool 3 script. In it, Deadpool was furious about a character not appearing, and was supposed to quip, "Disney is so cheap, I can barely breathe with all this Mickey Mouse in my throat." Of course, no one expected that line to make it to theaters, but that wasn't the point. The point was that Reynolds couldn't even joke about Disney's penny pinching in the script phase. It was a chilling signal, creative freedom wasn't just limited, it was disappearing. Insiders described the situation as a corporate muzzle. One writer revealed that Disney executives held weekly meetings just to comb through Reynolds' script, removing anything that even hinted at poking fun at Disney itself. Entire categories of references were declared untouchable.
I've been trying to get it made for 11 years. Yeah, we developed the script 6 years ago, wrote this fantastic script. It leaked online and Deadpool fans went nuts for it. So the studio granted us a small amount of money to make test footage. This test footage that we shot then sat on the shelf for 4 years, as it does. They didn't do anything with it. And then about just a little under 2 years ago, it leaked accidentally onto the internet. Well, here's the thing. The fans freaked out, the Deadpool fans freaked out and overwhelmed Fox, and Fox basically had to greenlight the movie.
Not only classic films like Bambi and Snow White, but even Disney Channel shows, theme park attractions, and executives' names. This wasn't just about the content of the film. Disney tried to extend that control into Reynolds' public life. Sources claimed they restricted what interviews he could give, what jokes he could make during press tours, and even what he could post on social media. Every comment, every appearance, had to be vetted by multiple layers of Disney approval. So when word broke that Reynolds had signed a massive deal with Warner Brothers, the studio behind darker, riskier projects like Joker, the Batman, and Peacemaker, fans didn't see it as betrayals. They saw it as liberation. Someone had finally stood up to Disney and said, "Enough." Disney loves to portray itself as inclusive, progressive, and artist-friendly. But Reynolds' experience tells another story. This is the man who made Deadpool happen in the first place. The same actor who leaked test footage years ago to force Fox into greenlighting the movie. That wasn't a stunt, that was conviction. Reynolds spent over a decade shaping Deadpool's voice, building the fan base, and convincing studios to take a chance. He wasn't just playing the character, he was Deadpool. And when Disney acquired Fox in 2019, it should have been a dream scenario. Bigger budgets, bigger platforms, the promise of Deadpool officially joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Kevin Feige himself reassured fans that Deadpool would stay R-rated. Bob Iger made public statements about respecting the unique nature of the character. But in practice, Reynolds was trapped in a corporate cage. Disney began drawing hard lines. Jokes were suddenly off-limits. Legacy characters were declared sacred. Even references to older films were scrubbed out. And here's the kicker. This is the same studio that had no problem creating Pirates of the Caribbean, a franchise literally based on mocking one of their theme park rides. But when Reynolds suggested a satirical scene where Deadpool wandered through a twisted Disneyland, complete with broken animatronics and creepy mascots, Disney said no, too close to home. The character famous for mocking corporate overreach was now living under it, and Reynolds was expected to smile, cash the checks, and play along. But this was Ryan Reynolds, actor, producer, entrepreneur, and one of the sharpest marketing minds in Hollywood. He wasn't about to be silent. This is the man who turned Aviation Gin into a $600 million empire, who built Maximum Effort Productions into a powerhouse, and who transformed Deadpool from an obscure comic character into a billion-dollar franchise. His fan base is one of the most loyal and vocal online, and they were watching closely. The moment whispers of censorship began circulating, backlash erupted. Fans were quick to remind Disney that Deadpool 3 was sold to them as the MCU's first R-rated adventure. That was the promise. But behind closed doors, it was turning into a watered-down version no one asked for. Even Reynolds himself started pushing back publicly, albeit with carefully worded jokes. During interviews, he would poke fun at Disney's strict culture, making quips about being sued for breathing near Mickey. Fans laughed, but the message was clear. He wasn't happy. And Hollywood was paying attention. Because this wasn't just a Ryan Reynolds problem. It was a warning sign to anyone working with Disney. If they could muzzle the man who made Deadpool possible, what chance did smaller creators have? This wasn't exactly new territory for Ryan Reynolds. Back when Deadpool and its sequel were under Fox, he had hammered out similar deals that gave him tens of millions in back-end participation, on top of his upfront salary. But once Disney acquired Fox in 2019, everything shifted. Insiders say the deal was quietly restructured without Reynolds' input, stripping away his creative veto power and tying his financial participation to conditions that heavily favored Disney. Suddenly, the man who helped make Deadpool a billion-dollar franchise was being treated less like a partner and more like a hired gun. If this sounds familiar, it's because Disney had pulled the same maneuver on Scarlett Johansson with Black Widow. When that movie was dropped on streaming and theaters simultaneously, Johansson's profit participation evaporated. She fought back, filing a lawsuit that dragged Disney through the courts, and the headlines, ultimately forcing a settlement rumored to be worth tens of millions. The lesson Disney seemed to take from that fight wasn't to treat its stars fairly, it was to bury loopholes deeper into the contracts. For Reynolds, that meant language in the Deadpool 3 agreement that gave Disney the right to shove the movie onto streaming platforms under vaguely defined extraordinary circumstances. That clause could mean another pandemic, or just corporate convenience, and if it happened, Reynolds' participation could shrink by more than 60%. Industry insiders whispered that it was less than half of what he'd earned on Deadpool 2, under Fox. The renegotiations, reportedly dragged on for months, meetings would end with fair agreements, only for Disney's legal team to return weeks later with new paperwork stuffed with restrictions, hidden in the fine print. Variety reported that Reynolds tried to fight this quietly at first, but eventually gave up. Meanwhile, Disney expected silence, hoping Reynolds wouldn't raise the same kind of noise Johansson had. What made the sting worse, his upfront pay for Deadpool 3 was said to be significantly lower than what Warner Brothers was offering him for each new project in their fresh deal. And the kicker, his share of streaming revenue was laughable, especially given the likelihood of a Disney Plus and Hulu premiere. And Reynolds wasn't alone. Jeremy Renner had already blown the whistle on Disney's long-running habit of lowballing the very stars who built its empire. Renner claimed he was offered half his original salary for a potential second season of Hawkeye, despite anchoring his own Disney Plus series and being one of the original Avengers who helped launch the MCU into cultural dominance. His blunt response, he refused. Renner even recounted how Disney tried to push him into a renovation series after his near-fatal accident, an example of the company's instinct to protect its bottom line first and its talent last. According to insiders, this wasn't random, it was Disney's strategy. Sign actors to multi-picture deals when they're hungry or unproven, then keep their pay suppressed even as they become indispensable. That worked in the early MCU days, with names like Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr., when nobody knew superhero films would dominate the box office. But even now, after proven billion-dollar franchises, Disney still wanted to pay 208 prices for 2024 talent. Sources close to Reynolds described the final negotiation meetings as insulting. Not only was the offer below market rate, it was structured to actively punish his success. The more the film earned, the smaller his slice would become, thanks to cross-collateralization and complex participation pools that buried him under Disney's other properties. As one lawyer put it, Disney seemed intent on making Reynolds an employee, not a partner. Meanwhile, Warner Brothers was on the other end of the table, offering everything Disney wouldn't: creative freedom, a richer back-end deal, and executive producer status across films and series. This arrangement wasn't even tied directly to James Gunn's DCU slate. Reynolds was being invited to build his own mature-themed comic book universe, with real financial participation. But the money was only part of it. The creative damage done by Disney was harder to swallow. Insiders said Reynolds' original script for Deadpool 3 went through 5 major rewrites, with nearly 70% of it either watered down or discarded in the name of brand sensitivity. The earliest drafts, described as the sharpest Deadpool story yet, had biting social satire. One storyline reportedly had Deadpool uncovering that superhero films themselves were corporate propaganda machines, designed to sell merchandise. Naturally, Disney killed it immediately. Another cut sequence featured a darker R-rated version of Avengers Tower being used for illegal experiment. A third involved Deadpool interacting with parody versions of Marvel executives, thinly veiled stand-ins for Disney's leadership. All of it was deemed too risky. There was even a scene reportedly filmed where Deadpool storms a Disney boardroom and pitches increasingly absurd movie ideas while executives calculate toy sales. Sources who saw it called it brilliant. Disney buried. By the time cameras stopped rolling, less than a third of Reynolds' original vision remained. Complex character arcs had been erased, sharp commentary replaced with safe one-liners, and bold set pieces swapped out for generic Marvel action. Behind the creative disagreements was the real issue: control. Disney's executives wanted final say on everything. Dialogue, costumes, tone. They wanted Deadpool molded into the MCU machine, not standing outside it. Reynolds wanted to make a Deadpool film. The conflict was inevitable. The breaking point came in a small interview moment where Reynolds recounted pitching a Bambi crossover, only to be met with a flat, "We don't touch Bambi." The line itself was harmless, but the tone carried weight. This wasn't collaboration, it was command. So Reynolds, by early 2024, he was in private meetings with Warner Brothers, pitching projects under a mature superhero banner. Warner, eager to expand its darker Elseworlds label after Joker 2 jumped, they offered Reynolds exactly what he wanted: total creative control, a back-end deal comparable to what Todd Phillips got on Joker, and a multi-picture agreement that included directing and producing credits. The reported term, around $200 million across 5 years, with the potential to double if the projects hit. Most crucially, he would own any characters or concepts he built under Warner's umbrella. For Disney, this wasn't just a failed negotiation, it was the loss of a star who had carried one of the most unique superhero brands into billion-dollar success, and now that same star was setting up shop with their biggest rival. The Elseworlds label, home to Joker and the Batman, has already proven that there's an appetite for darker, more complex comic book storytelling that respects the intelligence of its audience. These films don't exist to sell toys, set up crossovers, or make sure jokes play in every global market. They're standalone, uncompromising, and unapologetically adult. And now Ryan Reynolds is steering his career into that lane with a vengeance. What he's building at Warner Brothers isn't just another collection of superhero projects, it's a calculated inversion of everything Disney has forced Marvel to become. Sources close to the studio say Reynolds' first slate is already mapped out, and each title carries a message, not just for audiences, but as a direct rebuke to Disney's culture of control. Mortal Wounds, a neon-soaked, hyper-violent satire, co-written with longtime collaborator Paul Wernick. Industry insiders describe it as Deadpool by way of Taxi Driver, with a protagonist who doubles as a washed-up actor and viral vigilante. By night, he fights crime for clout. By day, he manipulates his fanbase with performative activism. It's a ruthless critique of Hollywood's obsession with branding, social media, and the blurred line between celebrity and morality. Disney would never touch it. Warner not only greenlit it, they're co-financing the project at a blockbuster budget and putting Reynolds in the showrunner's chair, full creative authority included. Lobo, the cosmic bounty hunter, long teased by DC fans, is finally being brought to life, with Reynolds writing, directing, and starring. This alone is staggering. Disney never allowed Reynolds to direct anything within the MCU despite years of proven creative instincts on Deadpool. Warner, on the other hand, is handing him the keys to one of DC's wildest properties. But this isn't just another anti-hero romp. Reports say Reynolds is turning Lobo into a savage sci-fi satire of corporate empires, environmental collapse, and the military-industrial complex. In other words, everything Guardians of the Galaxy could have been if it weren't weighed down by plushies and lunchboxes. Undone justice. Perhaps the boldest of all, a team-up project centered on forgotten vigilantes and anti-heroes, forced to face off against their own fictional studio overlords. Insiders describe it as part The Boys, part adaptation, a self-aware story about how corporate ownership warps creative storytelling. Warner is reportedly allowing Reynolds to bring in real-life creators, lawyers, and executives to play exaggerated versions of themselves. It's not just a movie, it's a direct commentary on the entertainment industry itself, and a not-so-subtle jab at Disney's suffocating grip on IP. These projects aren't random, they form a clear thematic throughline, dismantling corporate strangleholds on art. From influencer culture, to intergalactic capitalism, to the commodification of heroes themselves, Reynolds is constructing a creative arsenal designed to expose exactly what drove him away from Disney in the first place. And Warner is giving him unprecedented power to do it. Final cut approval, something only Christopher Nolan and Todd Phillips have been trusted with in recent years. A $50 million self-greenlight clause, meaning Reynolds can push projects forward without studio approval. Ownership rights to new characters and concepts, ensuring Disney-style clawbacks aren't possible. Effectively, Warner has created an independent studio within their studio, anchored entirely by Reynolds. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Disney still won't allow Taika Waititi to shoot an R-rated Star Wars gag. Warner, meanwhile, is gambling that creators unleashed from corporate handcuffs will deliver cultural lightning bolts. They don't care if Reynolds' movies sell action figures. They care if they get people talking. And people inside Hollywood are noticing. Directors who bristled under Disney's focus groups and corporate mandates are quietly reaching out to Reynolds' camp. Writers whose scripts were buried under brand protection clauses are resurrecting them for pitches at Warner. A ripple effect is already in motion. Meanwhile, Disney's Deadpool 3 is left in tatters. By the time Reynolds walked, multiple rewrites had gutted the script, cameos scrapped for political reasons. Third-act spectacle reduced to generic CGI fight. The biting commentary that defined the franchise replaced with sanitized quips, safe for all audiences. Even its runtime, reportedly under 100 minutes, reflects the neutered ambition. Disney's first R-rated MCU film is shaping up to have less edge than a Pixar so Disney is doing damage control. Studio-friendly trade outlets suddenly frame Reynolds' exit as planned. Executives whisper to journalists about how the split was amicable. PR teams stress mutual respect. But audiences aren't buying it, neither are industry insiders, and Reynolds himself isn't playing along. In interviews, his jokes are sharper, the subtext unmistakable. He isn't masking the truth, he's amplifying it. Disney thought money and NDAs could muzzle him, they forgot who he is. Ryan Reynolds doesn't just play Deadpool, he embodies the character's core purpose, exposing hypocrisy, mocking authority, and ripping through corporate veneers. And now, with Warner backing him, he has the platform and resources to do it at scale. This isn't one actor defecting, it's a paradigm shift. Reynolds has thrown down a challenge not just to Disney but to the very way Hollywood balances art and commerce. Warner has answered that challenge, and for the first time in a generation, Disney faces a competitor armed with both resources and authenticity. The war for the future of superhero cinema has begun, and this time, the mouse isn't holding all the cards.